Hey everyone, welcome to the M365 Pulse. You are joined with myself and Tamara today. Slightly different. Tom did not get hairier and slightly fatter. It is actually me and Tamara today. So we are going through and taking a look at the updates to the M365 roadmap. As always, we'll be looking at three or four categories if we count canceled, going through and starting with in development, going through rolling out, followed by launch. We have a fairly manageable list this week. It's nothing crazy like we had a couple weeks ago, but as always, we want to go through and look at some of our favorite ones. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my lovely and better counterpart, Tamara. You want to start us out from rolling out on what you found interesting, Tamara?
You bet. Toss, toss. For those of you who watch Wicked, you'll get that. All right, Microsoft Teams dashboard for chat. This feature is going to update the existing chat details page to provide more information to users and help them easily find content shared within the chat. So I think that's going to be very helpful. And then we've got content camera for Teams rooms on Android, and also with Android, default meeting layout controls for Microsoft Teams rooms. So the content camera can present analog whiteboard content digitally and appear in the share menu in the meeting. It's available with Teams Room Standard, Premium, and Pro licenses. Now that should be coming out in May. And then IT admins can choose the default meeting layout, selecting content only and content and gallery when choosing when content sharing begins. So that's in standard, premium, and pro. Customers can also choose front row as a default layout.
Nice.
Then I think the only other one that I wanted to talk about was users in GCC can give feedback via the help icon in Teams regarding their experience with the product. This drives how Microsoft is going to address trends and influences and future features and product updates. From the help icon, click on give feedback to provide verbatims. Oh, someone's being fancy with their word usage on your product experience. I'll tell you, Tom, I overheard a call with Tom yesterday. It was a chat. He was reading both sides of the chat aloud. And it was somebody looking for mermaids, a mermaid emoji, and they
Okay.
couldn't find the mermaid emoji and they wanted to suggest it to Microsoft. So that's you, right? And Tom's like, no, that's not me. Well, where do I go to make the suggestion? He's like, nowhere. It's Microsoft. But now, if you're in GCC, you do have an option.
Yeah, so what I'll say too, so I am, you've known me for a while, Tamara.
Yeah.
I am cynically disposed. I am probably a pessimist in the grand scheme of things. I
Realist
probably
leaning towards pessimist. Yes.
yes, and I probably tend to look, especially with large organizations like Microsoft. My first impression is not that they are trying to do good and lovely things for the world. I tend to probably have a cynical view, not necessarily about people's motives, but about how they're going to organize stuff. I was actually
Mhm.
super blown away. I'll talk about this experience briefly, but it's related to the help experience. I used to think that there was no way groups inside of a company as large as Microsoft would actually genuinely take user feedback seriously. And I had a very distinct memory where I went to Ignite and I was blown away at how much the product teams, when I was at Ignite, talked about the user feedback that all their products did. And what really stuck with me is I went to, I'm an Exchange nerd by heart. I went to an Exchange session that was put on by the guys who owned Exchange Online for Microsoft. And they were specifically going through and talking pretty extensively at the time of hybrid deployments, and that was becoming the big thing. If that's how you migrated to 365 and stuff like that. And what really surprised me is they literally had a slide towards the beginning of their presentation that was, here are the most upvoted things in the Exchange Online user feedback forum, and like listed them out like in like a list of 20, and then updated the slide one at a time to show the release date of when they addressed those features. And it
Wow.
was rather clear that like they were taking the most upvoted stuff that people wanted the most and like conscientiously going through and updating them. I talked to some of my friends at Microsoft and found out certain product groups are actually compensated on how well they address user feedback and the user voice and go through and get things
Wow.
addressed. So all that to be saying, I actually do think there are times that it makes sense to provide feedback if you genuinely have feedback. Microsoft's kind of perfected the modern feedback loop in the sense that oftentimes you go in and it's like a community forum where you can search to see if the thing that you want to give feedback on has already been suggested by someone else. And if it has, you can basically upvote it and say, yeah, this is important to me. This is what I want to do. If not, you can go through and create your own. But then the ones that get the most traction from users that are visiting the feedback form actually do get pretty good visibility to Microsoft. So that was my like
Right.
3-minute random tangent that I actually think in certain cases giving feedback to Microsoft is really, really good. Anything else you wanted to mention about in development?
No.
I have a couple nerdy ones I'll bring up. I always just think the tech side of this is cool. So this is probably not going to break anyone's bank. I don't think anyone that's going to listen to this is going to be super excited about what I say. But I just think the tech side of it is cool. They're updating Microsoft Purview for the data loss prevention optical character recognition support for endpoint. So that's OCR. If you've heard me and Tom have nerdily talked about OCR a little bit, OCR is the image recognition software that Microsoft uses in order to recognize what's going on in images. OCR, for instance, is what powers where, like, if you take a screenshot of a whiteboard that you're working on in a meeting, once it goes through OCR and Microsoft, they can actually read the text of the image and stuff like that. Well, extending out to endpoint soon is going to be the OCR functionality combined with data loss prevention. So if you go through and say something like, okay, I have data loss prevention that wants to prevent PII from going out, and then you have a picture that has someone's home address and first and last name, it's going to be able through OCR identify the text, but not only identify the text, also then identify that, hey, this is potentially something that should be triggering our DLP type response and ensuring that we're going through and protecting it, which is, again, this is probably not something someone's been desperately waiting for, but the tech behind it is just cool. So I wanted to mention it. I think it's fun and I think it's nerdy, and I like seeing stuff like this developed. I'll then also say there's a couple other things that I saw in here that I thought was pretty cool. One in particular I think is actually going to be pretty big. They call it Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Team Security. So Microsoft has put a pretty large investment in their Teams client. When a Teams client first came out, it was kind of their way to try to consume Office 365 groups. And you look at what you can do in Teams now versus what you could do then, and it's a much more robust feature. When I'm talking to new customers that are coming into 365, it's gotten to the point that I'm normally talking to them and saying, Teams is probably where you're going to live day to day while you're at work. I know that's true of me. I don't know if that's true for you, Tamara, but like I do check my email and I do go in there, but most of my day to day when I'm going through meetings, when I'm chatting with people, when I'm talking to customers is done through Teams for me. It's when I'm going through and looking at files or when I'm doing stuff like that. Well, Microsoft is now trying to basically equip some of the cool cybersecurity stuff that they're doing on the back end of 365 directly into the Teams client. So the idea behind the Microsoft Defender for 365 Team Security is it will provide protection and enhanced security operations experience directly in the Microsoft Teams client. These protection capabilities will include automatic remediation of malicious entities and support for end user reporting. In addition, Teams specific attack insights will be included in the unified investigation and response experience in the Defender portal. So in the same way that, like, if you've ever seen it before, where if you guys have ever had a retroactive email where like Microsoft has delivered an email to you that after the fact realized it may be malicious, they will sometimes tell you like, hey, you had gotten a message that was delivered, it was deemed malicious, we have gone through and removed it from you. Or they got to the point on Outlook that you could go in and report a message and like tell Microsoft directly why this message was spam or malicious or bad for you. That same type of enhanced user experience around security is coming out to the Teams client, which is just cool and I think definitely needed.
Great.
All right, cool. We can move on from there, moving on to from the in development
Rolling out.
side into rolling out. You want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Microsoft Teams pronouns are available on the profile card. That rolled out in March. So users have the ability to add pronouns to their profile card by adding the pronouns to their profile card.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple weeks ago when I was here, when I think it was last one in development.
Yeah.
Outside of the politically correct side of it, there are people that we work with in an international community that maybe I'm not fully used to their culture, that I read the name and I'm like, that could be a guy or a girl or an it. I have no idea. And so
Yeah,
having people to go through and put their preferred pronouns in, I think is absolutely wonderful. It makes you feel more comfortable at how to address those people when you're going into meetings or shooting them an email. So super cool.
absolutely. And then also Viva Insight apps in Teams with personal insights. This is rolling out for GCC High and DoD. This is a really limited version of Viva Insights that doesn't have all the bells and whistles that we get in the commercial instance, but it is coming out. And then explicit recording consent for Teams meetings. I think this is really important, especially if you're doing research and development or you're doing some top secret work or secret.
I like how it basically doesn't allow their team meeting to function until they give approval.
Until everybody gives consent.
Yeah, like until everyone gives consent, like it's essentially a non-functioning meeting.
Yeah, well, it's just apparently, according to this, it's non-functioning for the person who doesn't consent.
Yeah, no, that's what I meant. Not for the whole
Right.
thing, but the fact that like someone could join, and if they don't want to consent to being recorded, that's fine. The meeting can go on without them. They just don't get to participate in the meeting at that point.
Right, because the user's audio, video, and screen share won't work and won't be captured in the meeting recording. So I thought that was interesting. And the only other
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you first.
The only other thing I wanted to mention was the export Microsoft list as a data set for Power BI Data Hub. So no longer do you have to export it to Excel first and then pull it into Power BI. You can actually have that connection. So I like that.
Yeah, the only other one I'll mention, it's not even super nerdy. I just thought it's fun, and I know we have talked about this before. But rolling out now into the multi-tenant, so the standard Office 365. So this is GCC High, DoD, GCC, and normal Office 365. Intelligence to know that if someone raises their hand and then comes off of mute and speaks, it will lower their hand for them. So you don't have stale raised hands anymore, which I think is cool. And I think any of us that have been in large meetings know is a welcomed and desired feature.
Yeah, I just lower people's hands.
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely do that too. I just love that basically AI is going to allow me to not have to worry about doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
I am also the person, even if it's not my meeting, if I get on and in the modern thing we're all working remotely and someone just has terrible background noise going on, I'm muting you. Even if even if you're from the other organization, I'm joining your organization to a meeting. If you're just sitting there and I'm hearing kids in the background or loud stuff happening because you're in the car, you're getting muted. And if you need to talk, you can unmute and talk. But like I don't need to sit there and hear that the whole time.
True. So, and what drives me crazy is when people don't take the time to find out who the offender is and they hit mute all.
Oh yeah, no.
And it mutes the presenter.
It's easy to find out. It's easy to find out the offender because they're lighting up, and you can go through and see their mic. Like, come on, don't be lazy.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
So yeah, we can move on from there. We only have 3 in launch. Is there anyone you wanted to talk about?
Well, I already hit the Power BI one.
Yep.
And then the only one that made me really excited, because I will actually say this out loud. Who did this? Who did this?
No, as an admin, this is a great feature. Yeah, this is a great feature.
This is for SharePoint. This is review recent SharePoint site actions in the admin center. So you can review the most recent site changes you made from the SharePoint admin center in the last 30 days. Because someone will go in and they'll turn on something and they don't realize that it's like breaking a solution that we have. And so I'll be in there troubleshooting, just going, who did this? Who did this?
Yeah, so there's only one listed for canceled. And this one's interesting because I think if you know what you're doing in Exchange, you could in essence still do this. But it was a feature for Outlook where they called it frontline worker audience targeting using job code, location, and department. And the idea was if you need to communicate out to people that were on like the frontline support staff of your company, you could go in and say, all right, I want to communicate to everyone that's in, Harrisburg office or whatever it is and go through and communicate that way. But like effectively, as long as you manage your Exchange environment properly, you could still do this anyways, because you could set up departments and distribution lists and groups and stuff like that. There's multiple ways to skin this cat already. It sounds to me from reading this that they were planning on having this feature implicitly in Outlook, even if you didn't have, you hadn't gone in and done the organizational management to set up, specific locations and set up distribution lists and stuff like that. But realistically, this is something that most people that have been working in an environment, especially an Exchange environment, probably already have created for their company and already have stuff put together. So I'm not sure it was necessarily needed. So just as it's been removed, it's not, returning on another feature or something like that. But like I said, to me, there's about 10 ways you can already do this without this feature anyways. So I don't see it as a big loss.
Great.
That's the roadmap.
That's everything. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Have a good week.
Bye now.